Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Today we're going to be talking about the impact and sharing of gratitude and resentment in the form of gifts and burdens that we experience with people in relationship. We're going to try to make this a quick one and give you some prompts for takeaway. We always try. Sometimes we manage, sometimes we don't. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. And if you'd like to learn more about us, or if you'd like to learn how you can practice with us live, you can find out more on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we will do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
Nice. I'm going to dive right in because we're trying to make it short. So we'll feel our bums on our seat. But whatever you want to feel, your feet on the floor, whatever works. And we're going to connect to a breath that maybe you're familiar with. We might have done it together before. It's an inhale through the nose. And then you inhale a little bit more again. And then an exhale through the mouth. Really focusing on the exhale, releasing. I think we've done that one before. I wanted to get fancy and pair that with a movement that we've also done before. So can we do that, Steph? Or is that too much for today?
We can do it.
We can do it. Okay. So I think the breath is clear, right? It's inhale through the nose. Inhale some more, a little bit more, and then exhale. Okay, so that was the review. Now I'll walk you through the movement of the body, which is shoulders up to the ears, and then roll your shoulders back and then down. So there's 3 parts to this. Shoulders up to the ears, shoulders back, and then down. Right? So we're going to pair that breath with this movement. So it's going to be something like this. Inhale through the nose, bring your shoulders up to your ears. Roll your shoulders back and inhale a little bit more. And then drop your shoulders, exhale. And just notice how that feels. You could do that 2 more times if that feels good. Inhale. Inhale a little bit more, roll back. And exhale to drop. So again, if you need the instruction, inhaling through the nose, bring your shoulders up to your ears. Roll your shoulders back and inhale a little bit more. And then exhale, drop your shoulders. Yeah. And notice how that feels. If you prefer to just use the breath, just use the breath. If you prefer to just use the movement, just use the movement. Or you can let them dance together and play like that.
I like the dance together because it's the right amount of things to keep my brain from being distracted. It helps me just be in the moment.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Chop, chop. Here we go. Now that we're relaxed. Chop, chop. Here we go. I joke.
Well, we are working with duality and contrast today, so.
It's true. Yeah. So gifts and burdens, sometimes the same thing, sometimes different things, sometimes they can switch places. What did you want to talk about this day?
Well, the idea just caught my attention. I was asked in a group call to support someone with some mother healing work. And there had been a book that I was looking at previously. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll jog my memory of which prompt she wanted to go through by browsing through this book. I actually pulled a different book off the shelf, not the right one. And I was glancing through that. And the words that popped out to me were gifts and burdens. I didn't actually read what it said in the book, but there was something in me that I felt gifts and burdens. That's something to talk about. That's something to explore. So we had a whole group call chatting about this, and it was such a rich conversation. It was so enlightening for so many people that I thought it would be nice to share it with you on the podcast. And so I think we will share a few prompts that you could play with and explore and see what comes up for you.
I think there's probably a way that
I just
people
wanna think-
already sort of do this, which is often in a bypassing feelings kind of way. When something unpleasant happens, we can really quickly go like, okay, I'm going to do some things to regulate. And I can see how, even though this thing sucks, like, here are the reasons that maybe it's good or fine or sort of okay. And so we kind of take a burden or an unpleasant thing and try to draw the gifts out of it. So that maybe is an entry point for people to realize they already are doing this kind of thing.
And noticing if you have patterns of being more aware and focusing on gifts that someone's given you. And we're not talking about material gifts here. I mean, you could talk about material gifts, but the experiences that you've had with someone, what feels like a gift to you, what feels like it's been nourishing for you that you've received from them in your relationship. I think we tend to either miss those or minimize those or highlight them and miss the burdens or minimize the burdens or vice versa, right? You really exaggerate and feel and live in the burdens and you miss the gifts. So it can be really helpful to grow the muscle to learn to hold both and see that both exist within every relationship that you're in. And yeah, to hold them both as true, and also to practice feeling how they feel in the body when you acknowledge them. I want to say so much more, but I'm like, how do we keep it short? So maybe this ends up being a two-parter. I think it might be. Yeah. What did I want to say about burdens? I forget. Oh, yes. We have a tendency, some of us have a tendency to minimize a burden because of the logical things we understand. For example, we've talked to lots of people who said, well, my childhood was sort of tough and this was hard and that was hard, but my parents did their best. And I've done that too. And I think you've done that too. And we really had to practice being able to separate the things we felt were gifts from our parents and also acknowledge that some things were experienced as a burden and were hard for us. And that just because we understand that someone did their best, or we understand that someone didn't have the most capacity to give us any more, it doesn't diminish the fact that it was an experience that was unhelpful, unpleasant, didn't allow for thriving or growing, right? Or wasn't optimal.
Yeah.
So there's that.
And I think we don't want to hurt people's feelings, right? So we would rather internalize a feeling of burden and hardship and feel all the feelings that come with that than express them and risk hurting somebody's feelings or making them anxious or whatever all these things are, which just in the end means that we're not sharing of ourselves fully.
Right? And sitting with burdens for so long, right? Alone. That's a theme that we've seen a lot of people sitting with burdens for a long time without sharing them with anyone because they don't want to burden someone else or they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I wanted to speak about how we can sometimes, instead of sharing a burden from a way where we just share with someone our experience, it comes out as a lashing out or a complaint. And I think that when we do a follow-up to this podcast episode, we can get more into what that looks like to share a burden with someone in a way that isn't lashing out at someone, isn't firing back at someone, it isn't minimizing it, it isn't diminishing it, it isn't just nagging and complaining. It's a very clear way of sharing with someone what your experience is and the importance of practicing that. So we can get in that. That's just like the teaser trailer. We won't get into that today because then this won't be short.
Yeah, we'll do 2 shorts theoretically.
Yes. But what we'll give you, I think, Steph, if you think this is a good idea, is 2 prompts to work with.
Yeah.
And a little bit of guidance and direction of how you might work with them. Does that sound like a good idea?
Perfecto.
Okay. So I would say choose a person who you want to explore how gifts and burdens have shown up or are present in your current relationship or in sometime in the past in your relationship. And so when we were working with this on the call, the person who wanted support was looking to work on the mother wound. So it was specifically, we used mother. But if you don't want to use mother, you can use father, any other significant caregiver, any past partners, or anyone you have tension with. It could also be someone that you have no tension with and things feel pretty good. And that might be interesting to explore what you discover from gifts and burdens. So choose a person. And when we did this in the group, we played with trying these prompts out, focusing on different people and noticing what came up in different relationships. So I guess the first prompt is, for example, if I was thinking about my mother, it would be, Mom, a gift that I received from you was, right? Or a gift that I received from you is. And I guess I'll just do it on the spot. Mom, a gift that I received from you was watching how kind you are to people. And what I'm doing now, and I'm pausing with it and I'm noticing how it comes up in my body, how it feels in my body. There's a warmth there. I have an impulse to tell you more, to tell you more about it, to tell you more about how that impacted me. And that's all great and fine. First, I want to practice just feeling what it feels like to acknowledge that that is a gift that I received from my mother. And this will be maybe new for you. Maybe you've been practicing already, but we have a tendency when we do stuff like this just to list things out. And so it's just a verbal, I don't know, what do you call that stuff?
Assault.
Like, it's almost robotic. What's that?
Verbal assault. An onslaught of words.
A verbal assault. It's verbal diarrhea, It's just a gift that I received was this and that and this and this. And those all might be true. And it's unfortunate if we tend to do it in that way because we don't get the body experience of it. We don't get to feel how it feels to acknowledge that it was a gift. We were doing this in a group call the other day and someone had shared. And I noticed that she shared in a slower way already. It didn't feel like a verbal assault. It didn't feel like just dropping one thing after the other. And yet I was still curious what the body experience was like and whether she was willing to try it, slowing it down even more. And she was open and she tried it. And she's like, wow, like what, like we could just see visually that she was touched in a way that was very different than when she said them faster. When you just take one at a time and say it out loud and allow yourself some time to feel the truth of it in your body, whether it's 1% true or 100% true, you get a different experience with it. Right? And these are gifts anyways. You're not lying. You're not making stuff up. What a shame to lose out on that pleasant body experience.
Yeah.
Right. So we played with it in that way. Did you have some things you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I guess I'm reminded of how good you are at looking back on past romantic partnerships and remembering the good parts, which are traditionally what I release immediately. I can't remember any good parts. Why was I ever there? Like, all I remember is the shit, you know? And so how hard it might be for some people to connect with the gifts and the good parts. And I guess that might simultaneously bring up some grief. I mean, it could bring up all kinds of things along with the gift. So in as much as we're learning how to hold space for gifts and burdens, which we'll talk about more, there's going to be all the emotional content that comes up with that too, and just let that be there.
Those are really good points. I love how it highlights our differences, of course. Because what I had to practice, I am very good at seeing the gifts that I've received from people. What has been harder for me that I've had to practice more intentionally is see what the burdens have been and feel them. I stayed in a lot of connections for longer than was good for me because the muscle to acknowledge and feel the burden wasn't very strong in me.
Right.
And I would just focus on what was good, right? So it's a great life skill to be able to see and feel the gifts in a relationship, and also to see and feel the burden in a relationship, and to have them both coexist when you evaluate, should I be here? Is this in service of something good for me or not? Is this in alignment for me or not? So notice what your pattern might be with noticing gifts and burdens, and notice which side maybe is out of balance and needs a little bit more strengthening. And you might notice that in different types of relationships, you have a bit of a different pattern. Right? Who knows? So just things to consider.
Yeah, for sure. We were just on a live call and spoke a bit about this, the huge, tremendous capacity humans have for adaptability, and how we often apply that to burdens, perhaps unwittingly. We take on so much. We let things be okay that aren't really okay with us, don't really feel good to us, because we can handle it. This thing isn't actually killing me, so I can take it. I can hold it. And how it takes growing that opposite muscle, you know, either to recognize that actually this is too much for me, it doesn't feel good, and I actually do want to feel good in my life, and growing that capacity to feel good feelings, to hold healthy space and be in healthy, good feeling relationships, and to acknowledge when something is a burden or is too much or is more than you want to carry.
Yeah. I chuckled when you said, well, I'm not actually dying, so it's okay, because that was me and how I lived. Expanding a little bit more on gifts, just to give a little bit more maybe guidance, is when we shared this prompt with someone to work with. She had in mind, you know, someone who I think she wasn't in the best place with relationally. And she sort of smiled, and it wasn't a snicker. It was, but I knew I could feel the energy behind it. She says, a gift that I've received from him is assertiveness. And because I knew the backstory, I knew what she meant, in that I think she felt that she had no other choice but to grow her assertiveness in this relationship because of how she was being treated. And that can definitely be a gift, right? And we want to acknowledge those gifts, because sometimes hard situations require us to grow certain skills that become gifts for us. I also invited her challenged her, encouraged her to see if there was a willingness to explore if there were any gifts that felt like they had a different kind of energy, like a cleaner gift, a true gift, one that had some positive energy behind it. And she said, okay, I'm going to explore that a little bit. And then later in the call, she said, actually found 2 gifts. And so she shared, and as she shared each one, she got really emotional and teared up. And she said, I had forgotten about that. I had forgotten how much I valued that gift and experience. I could only sort of see the current tension that we have, the misalignment that's present now, right? And I don't think seeing this gift was something that, changed her whole mind about her relationship, but it was, I think she was appreciative of being able to feel and experience her dynamic with this person in a more fuller capacity, that both could be true, right? And that she didn't just, in order to stick with her boundaries, she didn't have to dismiss and cut off and pretend that this gift from this person never existed, right? This gift to her life, she got to relive it in that moment. And it brought her, I think, a lot of joy and peace to know that that gift was present in her life. So play with that, see what happens. Right. Another way that I notice with a gift, for example, is when the way someone shows up gives you an opportunity to explore or learn something about yourself. So maybe it's not that you develop this, skill of assertiveness, but for example, I was in a relationship where this person was really good at spending time on their own and really enjoyed it. And I hated it. My anxious attachment was like, don't you love me? Don't you want to spend all your waking moments with me? If you don't, it must mean you don't love me. What's wrong with you or what's wrong with me? And a gift is that I got the opportunity to learn how to, or I had the opportunity to spend more time with myself, right? And get to know myself better and get to know how I could enjoy spending time alone, right? So I had the opportunity to learn that, to grow that skill, because of the way we had contrast in that way. So I am still very grateful for that gift, although at the time I was pissed off and hurt.
Yeah, that's a good one. Many gifts are discovered later.
Yes, I did not see it as a gift at the time. And I think there's a lot of beauty in going back and revisiting and acknowledging what ended up being a gift. Because again, what a shame to lose out on that acknowledgement that, oh, that really was a gift. Yeah. Right. And it serves me in my life today in all of these ways.
Well, these are very good points, because I definitely am a person who will be experiencing a hardship, and then I just become a future predictor. I'm like, oh, this will be a gift. I will ignore this current burden and just look into the future that doesn't exist yet and know that it will be a gift eventually. So whatever. Bypassing the burden for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a slight nuance to that makes the hugest difference, right? I think it's a really healthy mindset to be able to say, like, this feels like a big burden right now, and I have faith and trust that there will be a gift in this for me at some point. And I'm not going there yet. I know I have faith and trust, but right now it feels heavy. Right now I feel sad or disappointed or angry or hurt. And I want to make some space for that very real experience.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that it's a burden.
Yeah. So is there another prompt that we did the gift prompt? Is there
yes.
some part to that?
The second prompt is related to the burden.
Mm.
So we could phrase it in many different ways. I think we tried using the prompt, a burden I received was, right? This was at the time we were doing mother work. So a burden that I received was, so for me might be, Mom, a burden that I received was feeling like I had to take care of your emotions and that trumped mine.
Right.
And again, you notice I'm silent for a moment because I'm letting my body feel it. I could have said more immediately, and then I wouldn't have felt how it felt in my body.
Oh, this is entirely why we do all of this body-based self-connection work, so that we can then be with whatever comes up through saying that. These are questions I would not have been able to ask myself in the past, because I would have become so overwhelmed with the big feelings that ensued, from just sitting with what you just now said, G. Even hearing somebody else say that would have caused me to just weep. Like I would not have been able to hold it. So learning to be with that, growing that capacity is huge.
Yeah, so like when we're practicing this with gifts, we want to say one at a time so that we can really feel the pleasantness of that gift. When we're learning to slow it down with a burden, we're learning how to be with maybe some of the unpleasantness of acknowledging that that's a burden and growing our capacity just one breath at a time with, ooh, that's an icky or hard to feel thing, right? I don't have to stay there forever. And I also don't have to add the next burden and the next burden and the next burden right away, which is what we tend to do. And then we get completely overwhelmed and dysregulated. So learning that I can just be with one thing at a time, feel my way through one thing at a time, and then also shift my focus after one breath if that feels like it's enough. Yeah. So this practice, although we've talked about it for a while now, is actually quite short and quick. And I'm wondering, Steph, are you willing to just give an example of walking through both of those prompts in relation to one person in your life and sort of showing how it works?
Yeah. What comes up for me immediately is one thing that is both gift and burden. And it's, I'd say it's my mom. So, Mom, a gift that you gave me was perfectionism, idealism. And that gift was also a burden.
Yeah. So I know you're sharing that gift was also burden. I'm wondering if you can say the burden sentence on its own fully and see how that feels.
Mm-hmm. Mom, a burden that you bestowed upon me was perfectionism.
Mm-hmm. How was that? What did you notice?
I also noticed the need to elaborate very much.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about that in the next part.
Yeah.
How the gifts of elaborating.
Yeah, the burdens.
First, we practice the skill. What's that?
And the burdens of elaborating.
Yeah. Right? Because there's gifts in both. There's gifts in being able to say it one succinct, short thing without elaborating and just feeling in the body. And then there's gifts in elaborating and sharing more about the inner experience of that gift or burden.
Something that I notice my mind does, and part of why I think we want to elaborate right away when we deliver one of these nuggets of ourselves, is we partly want to buffer other people's opinions. We want to prevent people from feeling bad or guilty or wrong. And it's also a very sneaky way for our egos to avoid feeling the feeling that's coming up in that moment. Right? I'll jump from the feeling I'm having right into my head and go into a bunch of explanations.
Exactly. That's exactly why we want to practice both. And you might notice you have a pattern or tendency that maybe you're typically quite succinct or vague, or you tend to generalize, and you find it harder to give specific examples. Or you might find that, oh, I really like to elaborate, and I find it difficult to just be with the short truth of it. And for me, I love to elaborate. So what I had to practice is to be short and then feel it. Pause and feel it.
Yeah.
Right.
Practice.
And I also noticed that my elaboration tended to be what you were talking about, like, buffering. There's a way of elaborating that buffers, and I think there's a way of elaborating that just honors more of the truth of it.
Yeah.
And they're different.
They are. Yeah. So for now, I think in this episode, we just wanted to present you guys with the notion that there are both gifts and burdens that you've received in relationship. One of those might be easier or more natural for you to notice or to hold space for, and how useful it is to grow the opposite muscle so you can hold all of your experience and all of yourself and all of each other in relationship. G, is there anything else you wanted to say about this before we do a closing practice?
I think two quick pieces here is what you highlighted is sometimes an experience is a gift and a burden at the same time. And also sometimes what someone thinks they're giving to us as a gift and they intend it as a gift is actually experienced as a burden. And sometimes someone is giving a gift and it's a well-intentioned gift. And it really, I don't know if I can explain this well. It really is a gift, but the stories we create in our mind make it into a burden.
Yeah.
And I think we can elaborate maybe on that on our next chat together.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. I'm feeling my bum on the chair already in anticipation of our closing practice. Do you have something?
Oh, so is that the closing practice, or is that the precursor to the closing practice?
That's the preamble. The butt-based preamble.
The preamble. The butt-based preamble. Nice. Okay. This is a weird, I don't think I've ever used this as a body practice, but I'm just doing it, so I'm going to share. Is just rotate your ankles. Notice how that feels. I think it's often a joint that we don't pay much attention to unless it's hurting us.
Well, now, isn't that interesting?
Let's move it around.
So I have a gift and a burden that's ankle related because, so I do pay attention to this joint because I have, for some reason, only 10% flexion in my ankles. So it is a burden to have only 10% flexion, but it is a gift that causes me to pay attention to my ankles regularly.
Look at that. Way to tie it all together. And I was like, wow, she pays attention to her ankles.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
If I don't, I get foot cramps.
I see. Well, I guess it's a gift that I have all movement in my ankle.
Yeah.
And hearing you speak about that actually reminds me like how many things we only pay attention to when there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And how nice would it be to like pay attention when there's no problem and enjoy that there's no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So thank you to my ankles.
Yeah. Thanks, ankles. Okay. Well, I hope everybody's feeling good in their ankles. If you have ankles. And
that's important for life, you know?
It is, especially for ankle movements. You got to have those ankles. Okay. Thank you guys for joining us. We're getting a bit silly now, I think. We will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us. As always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. We'll see you next time.